I'm Melanie Carson, 32, and my entire world collapsed with a single voicemail. You're out of the family business. Expect a call from our lawyer. My mother's voice was cold, emotionless, a stranger's voice. After 15 years of sacrificing everything for Carson Manufacturing, I was being discarded like yesterday's trash. The company I helped rebuild from near bankruptcy to a multi-million-dollar enterprise was being stripped away. What my mother didn't know. I discovered their dirty secret, and I wasn't going down without a fight. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who are supposed to love you the most, you know that hollow feeling in your chest. As I share this journey from heartbreak to justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Family drama happens everywhere, right? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against your own family, and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Carson Manufacturing wasn't just a business to me, it was our family's heart and soul. My grandfather Thomas Carson built it from nothing in 1965, starting with a small woodshop in our garage. I grew up watching him transform raw lumber into beautiful furniture pieces, the scent of sawdust and varnish becoming the comfort smells of my childhood. Every summer from age 7, I'd spend days at the factory, sketching designs on scraps of paper while Grandpa Thomas explained the importance of joinery techniques and wood grain patterns. Furniture isn't just functional, Melanie, he'd say with his calloused hands guiding mine across a cherry wood surface. It's where families gather to share meals, where babies take their first steps holding onto coffee tables, where memories are made. We're not just making furniture, we're creating heirlooms. By 12, I was designing my first real pieces. By 16, my junior collection was featured in our catalog. The family legacy was in my blood, and everyone, employees, customers, our extended family, assumed I would take over someday. But everything changed when Grandpa Thomas died suddenly from a heart attack when I was 17. The loss devastated us all, but especially my mother, Diana. As the only child, she inherited control of the company despite having minimal involvement before. She'd pursued a career in real estate, leaving the business entirely to my grandfather and my father, Harold, who had worked alongside Thomas for 20 years after marrying my mother. I was in my first semester at Rhode Island School of Design, pursuing my dream of becoming a furniture designer, when the frantic call came from my father. Mel, we're in trouble. Your mother's trying to run things, but she's making decisions without understanding the business. The bank is threatening to call our loans. Without hesitation, I packed my bags and came home, deferring my education to help save the family legacy. The company was bleeding money. Orders were being filled incorrectly, and longtime employees were leaving. Carson Manufacturing was 3 months from bankruptcy. I worked 18-hour days alongside my father, learning every aspect of the business while simultaneously redesigning our outdated catalog. My modern take on mid-century classics brought young professionals flocking to our showroom. My sustainable materials initiative earned us features in design magazines. My direct-to-consumer online strategy cut costs while expanding our market. Dad was my biggest champion, always pushing my designs forward in meetings and giving me credit publicly. Melanie saved us, he would tell investors proudly. She's the future of Carson. Meanwhile, my younger brother Ethan showed zero interest in the business. For years younger than me, he was a talented musician who spent his time in recording studios rather than our manufacturing plant. I didn't mind. Music was his passion like furniture was mine. We supported each other's dreams, even if our mother constantly compared us. Why can't you be practical like your sister? She'd ask Ethan. Why can't you be creative like your brother? She'd ask me. Nothing was ever quite good enough for Diana Carson. By the time I was 25, we had not only saved the company, but transformed it into a regional powerhouse with distribution across 12 states. Then tragedy struck again when my father died in a car accident driving home late from the factory. His death shattered me, but I poured my grief into work, determined to make him proud. 6 months later, my mother started dating James Whitfield, a silver-haired businessman who owned several car dealerships across the state. He was charming and attentive to my mother, who seemed happier than she'd been in years. I wanted to be happy for her, but something about James felt off. The way his smile never reached his eyes, how he steered every conversation toward money. They married in a lavish ceremony just 10 months after my father's death. I stood beside my mother in a bridesmaid dress, forcing a smile while wondering if Dad's side of the bed was even cold yet. "Be nice," Ethan whispered during the reception. "Mom deserves happiness." I tried. I really did. Especially when James started showing interest in Carson manufacturing, attending meetings and offering business advice. Diana began bringing him to board meetings, valuing his input over mine despite my years of successfully running operations. Then came Nathan, James's son from his previous marriage. 34, with an MBA but no actual work experience, he was suddenly hired as Strategic Development Director, a position created specifically for him. "He'll be shadowing you, learning the creative side," my mother informed me. "James thinks we need fresh eyes on the business." I swallowed my objections and tried to mentor Nathan. I showed him our design process, introduced him to our craftspeople, explained our sustainable sourcing. He took constant notes on his tablet, asking detailed questions about my design inspirations and supplier relationships. I mistook his interest for genuine passion. The first real warning sign came when I was unexpectedly removed from a meeting with our largest retail partner, a meeting I had arranged. When I questioned my mother, she waved it off. Nathan handled it beautifully. James thought it would be good experience for him. More exclusions followed. My emails went unanswered. My design proposals needed review by Nathan before proceeding. My team members were reassigned to projects under his direction. Meanwhile, our newest line, the Renewal Collection, was generating unprecedented buzz. My designs using reclaimed barnwood and zero-waste manufacturing practices had attracted attention from major retailers and secured us a feature in Architectural Digest. The morning of the voicemail, I was scheduled to present expansion plans to potential investors who were interested in taking our sustainable practices nationwide. I had no idea my family was plotting to cut me out of the very company I had saved. The morning started like any other. I woke at 5, reviewed my presentation over coffee, and headed to meet the investors at an upscale hotel downtown. The meeting went brilliantly. The investors were enthusiastic about my vision for expanding our sustainable furniture line nationally. "Your passion is contagious, Melanie," said the lead investor, Patricia Hernandez. "Carson Manufacturing clearly has innovation in its DNA, with you at the creative helm." I left the meeting walking on air, already mentally drafting the email to share the good news with the team. When I checked my phone in the parking garage, I saw 7 missed calls from my mother. Unusual, but not alarming. She often called repeatedly rather than leaving messages. Then I noticed the voicemail. I pressed play, expecting questions about the investor meeting. "Melanie, this is your mother." Her voice was formal, cold. "After careful consideration and consultation with the board, we've decided to restructure the creative department. You're out of the family business. Expect a call from our lawyer regarding separation terms. Your personal items will be packed and sent to your apartment. Do not come to the office." I played it 3 times, my hands shaking more violently with each replay. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. I called her back immediately, straight to voicemail. I called the main office line. The receptionist sounded uncomfortable, saying Diana was unavailable. I tried my direct reports, no answers. Dazed, I drove to the factory. My parking spot, marked Melanie Carson, Creative Director, had a construction cone placed in it. I parked in a visitor space instead and walked to the main entrance, swiping my access card. Denied. I tried again. The red light blinked mockingly. I pressed the intercom, and Greta, our receptionist for 15 years who had watched me grow up, answered with a trembling voice. "I'm sorry, Miss Carson. I've been instructed not to let you in. Your mother is expecting you to comply with the instructions in her message." "Greta, this is ridiculous. I work here. I'm the creative director." "Security is coming, Miss Carson." "I'm so sorry." She was crying. 2 security guards, men I knew by name, Men whose children had received Christmas gifts I personally selected, approached with uncomfortable expressions. "Miss Carson, please don't make this difficult," said Raymond, the head of security. "We're just doing our job." "My job is inside that building, Ray. The job I've held for 15 years. "Not anymore, ma'am. We have orders." As they escorted me back to my car, employees watched through windows. Some looked away in shame. Others appeared confused. My design team stood together, their faces showing shock and dismay. And there, in my mother's corner office window, stood Nathan Whitfield, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on his face. Beside him, my mother and James were engaged in conversation, not even bothering to watch my humiliation. I drove home in a fog of disbelief, nearly causing 2 accidents. At my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had I missed something? Done something wrong? The investors had been thrilled just hours ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, my assistant for the past 5 years and close friend. "They're announcing your departure as a personal decision to pursue other opportunities. Nathan is being named new creative director. Emergency all-hands meeting in 30 minutes. I'm so sorry, Mel." Another text followed. "Meet me at Charlie's Coffee at 7 p.m. Come through the back. I have something you need to see." The hours crawled by. Social media lit up with the company's announcement, painting my departure as amicable and planned. Former colleagues sent confused messages. My brother Ethan called repeatedly, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. At 7 sharp, I slipped through the back door of Charlie's Coffee. Jessica was waiting in a corner booth, a thick manila envelope on the table. "I could get fired for this," she said, sliding the envelope to me. "But what they're doing is wrong." Inside were internal memos, design documents, and marketing materials for the upcoming seasonal release. My designs, every single one, had been rebranded with Nathan's name as the creator. "There's more," Jessica said, showing me her tablet. "Look at the revised company history on the website." The new corporate history minimized my contributions to saving the company, instead crediting my mother's visionary leadership and James's strategic guidance. My award-winning designs were now described as collaborative efforts, or directly attributed to Nathan. "They've been planning this for months," Jessica explained. "Nathan has been copying all your design files, taking photos of your sketches. James convinced your mother that Nathan could be the face of the brand, younger, male, with an MBA more marketable to investors. But the renewal collection, that's completely my work. Not anymore. They're calling it Nathan's Breakthrough Design Initiative now. The press release goes out tomorrow." I felt physically ill. How can they do this? I own shares in the company. I'm on the board. Jessica looked grim. "Check your mail." They sent an official notice about an emergency board vote that supposedly happened yesterday. "You were removed from the board for failure to attend critical meetings." "What meetings?" "I wasn't notified." "They sent the notifications to your old email address, the one that was deactivated last year during the server upgrade. The manipulation was so calculated, so deliberate, I could hardly process it." "Your shares are being diluted too," Jessica continued. "They've issued new stock to company executives, mainly James and Nathan, as performance incentives. I left Charlie's with the evidence and a recommendation for an attorney. Marcus Rivera, a specialist in corporate law and intellectual property. I called from my car and was surprised when he agreed to see me immediately. Your situation isn't as uncommon as you might think," Marcus said after hearing my story. "Family businesses are particularly vulnerable to this kind of power play. The good news is you have rights. The bad news is your family has resources and seems willing to fight dirty." "So do I said, my shock finally giving way to anger. "They stole my life's work. They're stealing my grandfather's legacy." "Then let's get it back," Marcus replied, opening a notepad. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." As I drove home that night, my phone rang with my mother's number. I answered, heart racing. "How dare you take confidential company documents?" she hissed without greeting. "Jessica has been terminated." How dare you steal my designs? I countered. My entire career. Don't be dramatic, Melanie. You were compensated well for your work, which belongs to the company. Nathan has a fresh perspective that aligns better with our future direction. My future direction is to fight you with everything I have, Mother. She laughed coldly. With what resources? Against a company with a legal team on retainer? Be sensible. Take the severance package. Start over somewhere else. Like you started over with James before Dad was even cold in his grave? Silence, then. You never gave him a chance. You've been resistant to change from the beginning. This attitude is exactly why we needed to make this change. Change? Is that what you call erasing me from the company history? Stealing my designs? The company owns those designs, not you. Her voice was dismissive. James warned me you'd be difficult. This conversation is over. Our lawyers will contact you. She hung up, leaving me shaking with rage and hurt. The mother I thought I knew would never have done this. The woman who raised me to value honesty and hard work was unrecognizable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pored over the documents Jessica had provided, noting patterns of deceit that had been happening right under my nose. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about pushing me out. Something bigger and more sinister was happening at Carson Manufacturing, and I was going to uncover it all. With Jessica's documents spread across my dining table, I began to see patterns that didn't make sense. Quarterly financial reports showed discrepancies, large sums moving through accounts labeled vendor development and international expansion, with no corresponding projects I was aware of. As creative director, I should have known about any new vendor relationships or international initiatives. I created a timeline of strange events since James entered our lives. The company had been thriving under my leadership, yet suddenly there were cash flow problems requiring budget cuts to my department. Longtime suppliers were replaced with James's connections. 3 senior employees who had worked with my grandfather were pushed into early retirement. The documents were concerning but incomplete. I needed someone who understood the company's finances at a deeper level. I called William Foster, my grandfather's friend and our company accountant for 30 years until his retirement 2 years ago, coincidentally right after James arrived. Melanie, my dear. What a pleasant surprise, William's warm voice answered. When I explained what had happened, his tone changed dramatically. Those bastards. I knew something wasn't right when they brought in their own accounting firm and rushed me out the door. We met for lunch at his home, away from prying eyes. At 72, William was still sharp as a tack, his dining room converted into a home office with financial textbooks and family photos, including several of my grandfather and him fishing together. James Whitfield, William muttered, examining the documents I'd brought. The name was familiar when your mother introduced him, but I couldn't place it. Later I remembered he was involved with Apex Industries about 10 years ago. Left right before they were investigated for financial irregularities. Nothing was ever proven against him specifically. William put on his glasses and pored over the financial statements. These offshore transfers, they're structured to look legitimate, but the pattern is suspicious. See these payments to Global Resource Partners in the Caymans? They're exactly 4.9% of quarterly profits, just under the threshold that would trigger additional reporting requirements. He pointed to other transactions. Consulting fees to shell companies, unusual equipment purchases with no delivery confirmations, inflated expenses for business trips that never appeared on any calendar. Your father noticed something too, William said quietly. About 2 months before his accident, Harold asked me to quietly review some transactions. He was concerned about financial decisions your mother was making on James's advice. I was still gathering information when he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. My father's accident, I said slowly. Was it really an accident? William looked uncomfortable. I can't prove anything, but Harold was a careful driver. Always wore his seatbelt. The police report mentioned his seatbelt wasn't fastened when they found him. A chill ran through me. Dad never drove without his seatbelt. Never. There's something else you should know, William continued. After the funeral, I tried to continue the investigation, but suddenly I was being pushed toward retirement. Your mother said James had recommended a more modern accounting approach. I left William's house with copies of suspicious transactions and a growing sense of dread. If James had been systematically looting the company, what else was he capable of? My next stop was my father's storage unit. Mom had wanted to clear it out after his death, but I'd insisted on keeping it, unable to part with his belongings. I hadn't visited in months, finding it too painful. The small unit contained fishing gear, his woodworking tools, and several boxes of personal papers. In the back corner sat his old desk, the one from his home office that my mother had replaced with new furniture shortly after marrying James. I searched through the drawers, finding old photos, warranties for appliances, birthday cards I'd made him as a child. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath hanging files, was a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. Inside, in my father's neat handwriting, were dated entries beginning about 3 months before his death. October 15th, James suggested moving $275,000 to offshore account for tax purposes. Diana approved without consulting legal, deeply concerned about potential implications. October 28th, discovered falsified inventory records. Missing shipments never arrived but were marked as received. Jay involved? November 4th, called Malcolm at the bank. Loan documents have been altered. Original terms had additional safeguards that have been removed. How did this happen? November 10th, Diana becoming defensive when questioned about finances. Claims I'm being paranoid. Jay always in her ear. November 18th, found evidence of shell company connected to Jay receiving consulting fees. Need to gather more proof before going to Diana. The final entry was dated 3 days before his accident. November 29th, found connection between Jay and Garrett Holdings. Previous company he was involved with was stripped and sold for parts. Need to protect CM, meeting with lawyer tomorrow. If anything happens to me, evidence in safety deposit box number 247 at First National. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. My father had suspected James of criminal activity, and then suddenly died in an accident. The implications were horrifying. I called my brother Ethan, who had been leaving messages for days.
Mel.
Finally. What the hell is going on? Mom's saying you had some kind of breakdown and stole company files. Ethan, I need to see you in person. It's not safe to talk on the phone. You're scaring me, sis. You should be scared. I'll explain everything, but not over the phone. Meet me at Dad's fishing cabin. Come alone and don't tell anyone where you're going. 3 hours later, Ethan arrived at our father's remote cabin on Lake Mitchell. I'd swept it for listening devices, perhaps paranoid, but I wasn't taking chances. Ethan looked tired, his usually carefree expression replaced with worry lines. This cloak and dagger stuff better be worth it, Mel. I canceled a gig to be here. I laid out everything, the voicemail, the documents, Dad's journal, William's concerns. Ethan listened without interrupting, his face growing paler. James threatened me, he finally said. About 6 months ago. Said if I ever showed interest in the company, I'd regret it. I thought he was just being a protective stepdad to Nathan, but now. What exactly did he say? That accidents happen in families. I thought it was a weird thing to say, but... Ethan swallowed hard. You think he had something to do with Dad's death? I don't know for sure, but I'm going to find out. Ethan ran his hands through his hair. There's more. I overheard James and Mom arguing last week. James was pushing her to finalize some big sale. Mom seemed reluctant, saying it was too soon after Melanie's departure. James said the buyer wouldn't wait, and it was now or never. They're selling the company? To whom? Someone called Barrett or Barrett. James said he'd make everything disappear once the sale went through. I pulled out my laptop and searched for recent business news. There it was, Barrett Industries, a holding company known for acquiring family businesses, stripping their assets, and reselling the remains. They had a terrible reputation for mass layoffs and outsourcing manufacturing to China. If they sell to Barrett, everyone loses their jobs, I said. The Carson name gets slapped on cheap imports. Everything Grandpa and Dad built, everything I've worked for, gets destroyed. What can we do? Ethan asked. Fight back. But I need to access that safety deposit box. Dad said he left evidence there. Mom probably emptied it after he died. Maybe not. Dad had accounts Mom didn't know about. Remember how he always said to keep some things private, even in marriage? The next morning, I visited First National Bank. With my ID and my father's death certificate, I asked about box number 247. That box is registered to Harold Carson and Melanie Carson as joint holders, the manager confirmed after checking records. You have full access rights. Inside the box was a USB drive, an envelope containing bank statements, and a letter addressed to me in my father's handwriting. Melanie, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. The enclosed evidence shows financial fraud being perpetrated against Carson Manufacturing by James Whitfield. I believe he is systematically siphoning company funds through shell corporations with Diana's unwitting approval. I've traced his involvement in 3 previous companies that were financially gutted and sold for parts. I fear CM is his next target. Protect our family legacy, Mel. You're the heart of this company now. Love. Dad, I couldn't stop the tears. Even from beyond the grave, my father was trying to protect our family business. And now I had the evidence to continue his fight. The USB drive contained detailed financial records, emails James had sent from a company account, and background research on his previous business failures, all of which followed the same pattern. Marry into or gain trust of family business owners, manipulate finances, orchestrate a crisis, then save the company by facilitating its sale to corporate raiders. James received kickbacks at every step while the original families lost everything. I took the evidence to Marcus, who whistled low as he reviewed it. This is serious stuff, Melanie. Securities fraud, wire fraud, possibly even involvement in your father's death. We need to bring in authorities. Not yet, I said. If we move too quickly, they'll destroy evidence. And I need to protect my mother. She's a victim in this too, even if she doesn't see it. What's your plan? Stop the sale. Expose James. Save the company and the jobs of hundreds of employees who depend on it. I need time to build an airtight case. Marcus nodded. Then let's get to work. For the next 3 weeks, I operated like a woman possessed. My apartment became command central for what Ethan jokingly called Operation Family Justice. Each wall featured timeline charts, financial documents, and connection maps linking James to suspicious activities. My core team met daily. Jessica, who'd been fired but brought valuable insider knowledge, Marcus, my attorney, William, analyzing financial records, and Ethan, who used his music industry connections to gather background information on James's associates. We worked in careful secrecy, communicating through encrypted messaging and using burner phones for calls. We need to document every instance of intellectual property theft, Marcus advised during our strategy session. Your designs are your strongest claim. I created detailed portfolios showing my original sketches, development notes, and prototypes for every piece in the renewal collection, with timestamps and witnesses who could verify my creative process. We gathered emails, meeting minutes, and public statements where my role had been acknowledged before the revisionist history began. The financial fraud is the most serious legal issue, William noted, but proving design theft will resonate emotionally with the board and public. Meanwhile, Jessica developed relationships with employees still loyal to me. As Carson Manufacturing's longest-serving employees began receiving the company's new marketing materials, with Nathan credited for my work, many were outraged. Martin from the workshop floor says he'll testify that Nathan couldn't tell oak from pine before you taught him, Jessica reported. And Denise from accounting kept copies of expense reports showing Nathan billing the company for research trips when he was actually on vacation with friends. Loyal customers provided another avenue of support. I'd personally handled many of our major accounts, and several reached out after my departure, confused by the sudden change. Patricia Ryerson from Westfield Hotels called, Jessica said. They specifically contracted with Carson because of your sustainable designs. She's willing to provide a statement that Nathan wasn't involved in any of their planning meetings. While building evidence of James's financial schemes required careful detective work, William's expertise proved invaluable. He identified nearly $3.2 million that had been diverted to shell companies over the past 2 years. It's sophisticated, he explained, pointing to transaction records. But there's a pattern. James creates legitimate-sounding vendor relationships, inflates the invoices, then pockets the difference through companies he controls. We hired a forensic accountant, Leila Sharma, who specialized in fraud investigations. After reviewing our evidence, she confirmed our suspicions. This is classic embezzlement and money laundering, Leila stated. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the inflated expenses, all designed to slowly bleed the company while avoiding detection. Can we prove James is behind it? I asked. These signature patterns match other cases I've investigated. But we need the smoking gun, direct evidence linking him to the shell companies. That breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus had quietly approached several board members with our concerns, careful to frame the conversation as protecting the company rather than attacking my mother. Board member Franklin Pierce, my grandfather's old friend, was particularly disturbed by what we shared. Thomas would be rolling in his grave, he said during our confidential meeting. I've been uncomfortable with James's influence, but your mother seemed so happy. I didn't want to interfere. Franklin revealed that the board had been told I was leaving to start my own design firm, a direct competitor, which justified my abrupt removal. They'd also been shown fabricated performance reports indicating my department was underperforming. They presented documents showing your designs weren't selling well, despite what we were hearing in the market, Franklin explained. The numbers seemed off to me, but James had his financial team verify them. With Franklin's help, we identified 2 other board members who had reservations about the company's direction. Both agreed to review our evidence privately. Our most significant ally emerged from the financial department, Gabrielle Winters, a senior accountant who had worked directly under William before his retirement. She contacted us through Jessica. I've been documenting irregularities for months, Gabrielle told us, sliding a flash drive across the table during our secret meeting at a suburban Starbucks. James brought in his own financial team, who bypassed standard approval processes. When I questioned certain transactions, I was removed from those accounts. Gabrielle's evidence included internal memos showing James had directed the creation of fake performance reports, the same ones presented to the board to justify my removal. She also had emails discussing the upcoming sale to Barrett Industries, including disturbing details about plans to liquidate company assets immediately after the sale closed. They're not just selling the company, Gabrielle explained. They're stripping it for parts. The factory will be closed, manufacturing moved overseas. The Carson name will just be a label slapped on cheap imports. 200 people will lose their jobs, I said, feeling sick. That's the plan. The timeline shows the announcement coming 30 days after the sale closes, right after executive bonuses are paid out. With mounting evidence, we faced a painful decision regarding my mother. Was she a willing participant in James's schemes, or another victim? We need to understand her role, Marcus advised. Her actions facilitated this fraud, but was she aware of the extent? The answer came from James's ex-wife, Rebecca Whitfield. Ethan tracked her down through his music industry connections. Her brother was a sound engineer who had worked with Ethan's band. Initially reluctant to meet, Rebecca finally agreed after hearing about the situation. We met at a restaurant 2 hours from the city to avoid being seen. James did the same thing to my family's business, Rebecca said, her hands shaking slightly as she sipped her coffee. My father owned a chain of pharmacies. James charmed his way into our lives, married me, then gradually took control of the business. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. The business was sold, my father died of a heart attack from the stress, and James walked away with millions while our family name was destroyed. Did you go to the authorities? Marcus asked. We tried. James had covered his tracks too well, and he countersued us for defamation. We couldn't afford to fight him in court. He's very good at making the victims appear crazy or incompetent. That's exactly what he's doing to me, I said. Rebecca nodded. It's his playbook. First, he isolates his target from allies. Then, he rewrites history to make it seem like they were never important to the business. Finally, he forces them out and ensures they appear unstable if they fight back. And my mother? I asked. How much do you think she knows? Rebecca's expression softened. In my experience, the spouse is manipulated too. James is incredibly convincing. He makes you feel special, important. My guess is your mother believes she's making good business decisions. James is skilled at presenting information in a way that leads to his desired outcome while making the other person think it was their idea. Rebecca provided affidavits detailing James's past behaviors and copies of legal documents from her family's failed attempts to hold him accountable. She also offered to testify if needed. I should have fought harder years ago, she said as we parted. Maybe I could have stopped him before he destroyed your family too. With our evidence mounting, we developed a multi-pronged legal strategy. Marcus prepared filings for 1. An emergency injunction to block the sale of Carson Manufacturing 2. A civil suit for intellectual property theft and fraud 3. A shareholder action to remove James and Nathan from their positions 4. Documentation for potential criminal charges. Once our civil case progressed, as I reviewed the legal documents, I struggled with mixed emotions. Taking legal action against my own mother felt like the ultimate betrayal, even if she had betrayed me first. You're not just doing this for yourself, Ethan reminded me. You're doing it for Dad, for Grandpa, for every employee who depends on Carson Manufacturing for their livelihood. But Mom will be devastated. Her reputation, her marriage to a man who might have been involved in Dad's death, Ethan said bluntly. A man who's stealing from her company and planning to destroy Grandpa's legacy. He was right, but it didn't make it any easier. As we finalized our legal strategy, I stared at a family photo from happier times, my parents, Ethan, and me at the factory's 40th anniversary celebration. Dad's arm was around my shoulders, pride evident in his smile, as I showed off my first major furniture collection. I'm doing this for you, Dad, I whispered to the photograph. I won't let them take everything you built. I've been thinking about family a lot lately, how the people who are supposed to protect us can sometimes cause the deepest wounds. As I gathered evidence against my own mother and stepfather, I wondered how many of you have had to make impossible choices to stand up for what's right. If this story resonates with you, maybe hit that like button so I know I'm not alone in this struggle. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join our community. Sometimes the family we choose supports us better than the family we're born into. Now, let me tell you about our countermove. With our evidence organized and legal strategy in place, we launched our counterattack on multiple fronts simultaneously. Marcus filed an emergency injunction to block the sale of Carson Manufacturing to Barrett Industries, citing shareholder rights violations and potential fraud. The court documents included evidence of my intellectual property theft, but strategically omitted the more serious financial fraud allegations. We wanted to catch James off guard with those later. Filing this injunction will alert them that we're fighting back, Marcus warned. Be prepared for retaliation. He was right. The same afternoon our injunction was filed, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was shrill with anger. What do you think you're doing? This ridiculous legal stunt will damage the company. I'm protecting the company from James. James has saved this business. He's brought in opportunities we never had before. Like selling to Barrett Industries so they can fire everyone and move manufacturing overseas? A pause. How did you? That's confidential business information. Did you know that's their plan, Mom? To shut down the factory within 30 days of the sale? To fire everyone who's worked for our family for generations. That's not. James assured me they would maintain operations. He's lying to you, just like he's been lying about everything else. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was ice cold. You'll be hearing from our attorneys. I tried to be generous with your separation package. That offer is now withdrawn. The next assault came through the press. An article appeared in the local business journal questioning my departure, citing sources close to the company, who suggested I had been removed for erratic behavior and declining performance. The piece prominently featured Nathan showcasing his renewal collection with quotes about his vision for sustainable furniture. We had anticipated this move. Jessica had cultivated relationships with several design bloggers and industry publications, who now began asking pointed questions about the sudden creative shift. We provided them with dated sketches, development photos, and testimonials from artisans who had worked directly with me on the collection. Design Quarterly published a feature titled, "Who Really Created the Renewal Collection?" featuring side-by-side comparisons of my original concept sketches, dated 2 years earlier, and the final products now being credited to Nathan. Our media strategy was careful. We focused on the design theft without mentioning the financial improprieties yet. As Marcus explained, we want them focused on defending against the intellectual property claims while we build our case for the more serious allegations. The company's response was swift. Carson Manufacturing issued a press release stating that all designs were company property created under work-for-hire agreements, regardless of the individual designer. Technically true from a legal standpoint, but the public reaction was negative, especially when former employees began speaking out about my contributions. 3 days after our injunction filing, I was having coffee at a small cafe when Nathan slid into the seat across from me, uninvited. "You're making a huge mistake," he said without preamble. "The mistake was trusting you while you stole my designs." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. My father doesn't lose, ever. Drop this lawsuit nonsense, take the settlement, and walk away while you still can." Or what? Things happen to people who cross us. Accidents. Reputational problems. It would be a shame if designers in the industry heard you were unstable, difficult to work with, prone to substance abuse. My phone was recording in my pocket. "Are you threatening me, Nathan?" "I'm offering friendly advice. Family to family." His smile never reached his eyes. "Think about what happened to your father." I felt cold dread in my stomach. What about my father? Just saying, car accidents are so unpredictable. 1 minute you're driving home, the next, he snapped his fingers. All over. I struggled to keep my expression neutral. That sounds like a threat, a history lesson. Dad always says those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Nathan stood, adjusting his designer jacket. "You have until Friday to withdraw your lawsuit. After that, we can't guarantee your safety, professional or otherwise." As soon as he left, I sent the recording to Marcus, who immediately filed for a temporary restraining order against Nathan. The judge granted it the same day based on the explicit threat. That evening, James called. "This situation has gotten out of hand," he said smoothly. "I think we need to meet, just you and me, to resolve this amicably. With my attorney present. No lawyers. Just family sorting out family problems." "So you can threaten me like Nathan did?" He chuckled. "Nathan is young and impulsive. I apologize for his behavior. But seriously, Melanie, this path you're on will only hurt everyone, especially your mother. She's devastated by your actions. I'm trying to save her company." "From what? Success? Financial security. The Barrett deal will make her wealthy beyond imagination. You too, if you cooperate. I can guarantee you $2 million cash if you drop this vendetta and sign a non-disclosure agreement." The casual offer of such a large bribe confirmed everything we suspected. "Are you attempting to bribe me, James?" "I'm offering a business solution." "Think about it. $2 million. You can start your own design firm, free from family complications. And all the employees who lose their jobs when Barrett shuts down the factory? What about them? Business evolves, Melanie. Change is inevitable." My answer is no. His tone hardened. "Then prepare for war. We have resources you can't imagine and friends in places you don't even know exist. By the time we're done, you'll wish you'd taken the offer." The threats escalated to actions. My car was vandalized in my apartment parking garage. All 4 tires slashed. The following day, a brick was thrown through my living room window with a note, "Drop the case or worse is coming." Ethan insisted I stay at his place, which had better security. Marcus filed police reports, but without direct evidence linking the incidents to James or Nathan, little could be done. Meanwhile, our legal strategy was working. The emergency injunction temporarily halted the sale proceedings, buying us time. Board member Franklin Pierce used his influence to call an emergency meeting to discuss the sale and the concerns raised in our legal filings. James is panicking, Jessica reported after speaking with her contacts still at the company. He's pressuring your mother to fight the injunction with everything they've got. The Barrett deal apparently has a deadline, and they're getting nervous. Indeed, Carson Manufacturing's attorneys filed aggressive motions to dismiss our claims, portraying me as a disgruntled former employee attempting to sabotage the company out of spite. They submitted affidavits from my mother and several executives James had installed, all testifying to my supposed performance issues and Nathan's creative contributions. The company's PR offensive shifted into high gear, with press releases highlighting recent successes under new leadership and announcing exciting expansion opportunities through the pending acquisition. They didn't mention that the expansion would be in Chinese manufacturing while American jobs disappeared. Our side wasn't idle. Gabrielle from accounting provided documentation showing how financial reports had been manipulated to create the illusion of poor performance in my department. William analyzed the company's recent financial disclosures and identified clear inconsistencies that suggested continuing fraud. Most importantly, Marcus's investigative team finally established direct connections between James and the shell companies receiving funds from Carson Manufacturing. Corporate registration documents in Panama and the Cayman Islands showed James was the beneficial owner of entities that had received over $3 million from the company. "This is our smoking gun," Marcus said, reviewing the evidence. "With this, we can go to the authorities." But before we could act, I received a disturbing call from Franklin Pierce. "They've scheduled the board vote on the Barrett sale for Friday," he said urgently. James somehow convinced them to overrule the injunction based on some emergency business necessity clause. They're claiming the company will face bankruptcy if the sale doesn't proceed immediately. That's absurd. The company is profitable. They've presented financial documents showing a cash flow crisis. Very convincing ones. "They're fabricated," I insisted. "I believe you, but most of the board doesn't. James has them terrified about losing everything if the sale doesn't go through." We had to accelerate our timeline. Marcus prepared a comprehensive presentation for the board meeting, while William and Layla organized the financial evidence. Jessica coordinated statements from employees and customers willing to testify about my contributions and the company's actual financial health. As the board meeting approached, our biggest challenge remained my mother. Despite everything, I couldn't believe she knowingly participated in criminal activity. Manipulated, yes. Willfully criminal, no. "We need to try reaching her one more time," I told Ethan, "before everything explodes publicly." "She won't listen to you," he pointed out. "She thinks you're attacking her. But she might listen to you. You've stayed neutral in her eyes." Ethan agreed to try. He arranged lunch with our mother, carefully keeping the conversation casual until dessert. "Mom, have you considered the possibility that James might not have the company's best interests at heart?" he asked gently. According to Ethan, her reaction was defensive but revealing. "James has business expertise none of us have. Sometimes his methods seem unorthodox, but he's protected us from financial ruin." "What financial ruin?" "The company was thriving under Melanie's leadership." "There were problems you don't know about," she insisted. "James discovered serious issues with the company's finances, issues your father had hidden from me." "Did James show you proof of these problems?" "Of course. Extensive documentation." "And did anyone else verify these issues?" "William Foster, perhaps?" She hesitated. William was near retirement. His methods were outdated. "Mom," Ethan said carefully, "what if the documents James showed you weren't accurate? What if he created problems to solve them and make himself indispensable?" "That's ridiculous. Why would he do that?" "For control. For money. It's what he did to his first wife's family business." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "Rebecca Whitfield's family. They owned pharmacies. James married her, took control, manufactured a crisis, then facilitated a sale that destroyed the business while he walked away wealthy. That's not. He never mentioned. Our mother looked shaken. There's more, Mom. A lot more. Melanie has evidence. Real evidence. Will you at least look at it before the board vote? She refused, but Ethan said her confidence seemed shaken. I planted the seed of doubt, he told me afterward. Whether it grows in time is another question. The night before the board meeting, another unexpected ally emerged. Rebecca Whitfield called me in a panic. I've been doing more digging into James's activities since we met, she said. I found something you need to see immediately. It's about your father's accident. We met at a 24-hour diner off the highway. Rebecca handed me a folder containing printed emails she had recovered from an old computer. James used my email occasionally, when we were married. I found these in a hidden folder. They're from 7 years ago, but the emails were between James and someone identified only as M. They discussed removing obstacles at a previous company and referenced making it look like an accident. One email specifically mentioned brake lines and untraceable. I can't prove these relate to your father, Rebecca said. But the timing matches when James was first getting involved with your mother and company. It wasn't definitive proof, but combined with everything else, it painted a damning picture. I added the emails to our evidence file for the board meeting, knowing tomorrow would determine not just my future, but the fate of Carson Manufacturing and everyone who depended on it. As we finalized our preparations late into the night, Ethan asked the question weighing on all our minds. What if we fail? We won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. Dad started this fight. We're going to finish it. The Carson Manufacturing headquarters looked the same as it had for decades. The red brick building with large windows and the carved wooden sign my grandfather had commissioned when the company outgrew its original location. But as I approached the main entrance for the first time since being escorted out, it felt like entering enemy territory. Marcus walked beside me, carrying a leather briefcase containing our evidence. Behind us came our team. William Foster, Layla Sharma, Jessica, Ethan, Gabrielle from accounting, and Rebecca Whitfield. Each carried a specific piece of our case, ready to present if called upon. We timed our arrival to coincide with the board members entering for the emergency meeting. James couldn't prevent our entry without making a scene in front of the board. As predicted, when the receptionist began to call security, board member Franklin Pierce intervened. They're with me, he announced loudly. I've invited them as relevant parties to today's discussions. James appeared in the lobby, his usual composed demeanor showing cracks of alarm. This is a closed board meeting, he said sharply. Ms. Carson is no longer affiliated with this company. I'm still a shareholder, I replied calmly. And according to company bylaws, shareholders have the right to address the board on matters affecting company valuation, like a proposed sale. Franklin nodded. I've reviewed the bylaws, James. She has standing to speak. James's face tightened.
Fine.
You have 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting, then you and your entourage will leave. The board will determine that, Franklin countered. Not you. We were escorted to the boardroom, the same room where I'd presented countless designs and business plans over the years. Now I entered as an outsider, met with shocked expressions from board members and executives. My mother sat at her usual place at the head of the table, James standing behind her like a puppeteer. Nathan sat smugly to her right, in what had once been my chair. Diana Carson's face registered shock, then anger at my appearance. What is she doing here? Saving your company, Mother, I replied. Franklin Pierce called the meeting to order, acknowledging the unusual circumstances. We have 2 agenda items today. The proposed sale to Barrett Industries and serious allegations of corporate malfeasance that could affect that sale. As these allegations come from a shareholder, we are obligated to hear them. James immediately objected. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled former employee trying to sabotage a beneficial transaction. Let's hear the evidence before making that determination, said Eleanor Wu, another board member who had known my grandfather. Ms. Carson has earned the right to be heard. Marcus set up our presentation while I took a deep breath, focusing on the family photos lining the boardroom walls. 3 generations of Carsons who had built this company with integrity and hard work. Board members, executives, and employees of Carson Manufacturing. I began. The proposed sale to Barrett Industries isn't a strategic opportunity. It's the culmination of a calculated fraud that has been perpetrated against this company for the past 2 years. I laid out our case methodically, starting with the evidence most personal to the board, the systematic erasure of my contributions and theft of my designs. These aren't just my designs being stolen. They're Carson Manufacturing's intellectual property being falsely attributed to create a narrative of new leadership and innovation where none exists. We displayed side-by-side comparisons of my original sketches with timestamps and the recently released marketing materials crediting Nathan. Former artisans testified via video about working directly with me on pieces Nathan now claimed as his own. Nathan shifted uncomfortably as his lies were exposed. James remained impassive, but I noticed his hand tightening on my mother's shoulder. Diana looked confused, then increasingly disturbed as the evidence mounted. Next came the financial evidence. William Foster presented his analysis of suspicious transactions, supported by Gabrielle's internal documents showing how normal accounting protocols had been bypassed. Layla Sharma, our forensic accountant, demonstrated the pattern of funds being siphoned to offshore entities. Over the past 24 months, Layla explained, approximately $3.2 million has been diverted from Carson Manufacturing through various mechanisms. Inflated vendor contracts, fabricated consulting agreements, and fraudulent expense reimbursements. James finally interrupted. This is absurd speculation without context. These were legitimate business expenses related to our international expansion initiatives. Interesting you should mention that, Layla replied coolly, clicking to her next slide. Because we've traced the beneficial ownership of these international partners. They all lead back to shell companies registered in your name, Mr. Whitfield. The room erupted. Board members demanded explanations. James attempted to dismiss the evidence as fabricated. My mother sat frozen, her face unreadable. When order was restored, Marcus presented the most damning evidence, documentation showing James's involvement in similar schemes at 3 previous companies, including Rebecca Whitfield's family business. Rebecca herself stepped forward. James Whitfield married me to gain access to my family's pharmacy business. Within 2 years, he had convinced my father we faced financial ruin and needed to sell. The company was liquidated, employees lost their jobs, and James walked away with millions while my father died brokenhearted. James's face contorted with rage. This is character assassination. Rebecca is a bitter ex-wife with a vendetta. The pattern is undeniable. Marcus continued calmly. Mr. Whitfield identifies family businesses, inserts himself through marriage or partnership, manufactures financial crises, then facilitates sales that benefit him personally while destroying the companies. We then revealed the proposed Barrett Industries contract terms, which Franklin had helped us obtain, showing that this strategic partnership was actually a liquidation plan. Manufacturing would move overseas within 30 days. All employees would be terminated, and the Carson name would become merely a brand slapped on imported products. This is the opportunity James has been pushing, I said. The destruction of everything my grandfather and father built, everything I've worked for, everything our employees depend on. Board members looked increasingly disturbed. James attempted to regain control, insisting the financial situation necessitated the sale regardless of past actions. The company faces imminent cash flow problems, he declared. Without this sale, bankruptcy is inevitable. Another lie, William countered, presenting current financial statements obtained through Gabrielle. Carson Manufacturing is highly profitable with substantial cash reserves. The crisis exists only in fraudulent reports prepared under Mr. Whitfield's direction. Throughout our presentation, I watched my mother. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion to dawning horror as the evidence accumulated. When James tried to whisper something to her, she shrugged his hand from her shoulder. The final blow came when Ethan addressed the board about our father's death. We have reason to believe my father's fatal car accident may not have been an accident, he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of the accusation. Harold Carson had discovered financial irregularities and was investigating James Whitfield's background in the weeks before his death. Gasps filled the room. My mother's face went pale. That's preposterous, James shouted. You have no evidence. We have my father's journal, I said, displaying the pages on the screen, documenting his concerns and investigation. We have testimony from William Foster confirming Dad consulted him about suspicious transactions. And we have these. I displayed the emails Rebecca had discovered, discussing removing obstacles and making it look like an accident. These emails cannot be definitively linked to my father's death, I acknowledged. But combined with everything else we've presented, they warrant a full investigation. James lunged toward the presentation screen. This is all fabricated. She's trying to sabotage the company out of spite. I'm trying to save it, I corrected him. From you. Nathan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly stood. This is insane. You can't possibly believe this conspiracy theory nonsense. Eleanor Wu, who had been taking detailed notes, looked up. Mr. Whitfield, the younger, perhaps you can explain why your name appears on wire transfer authorizations to these shell companies? According to these documents, you personally approved several transfers to Global Resource Partners in the Caymans. Nathan's face drained of color. I just signed what I was told to sign. I didn't know. You didn't know you were signing fraudulent financial documents? Marcus asked. That's still a crime, Mr. Whitfield. Dad said it was tax planning. Legitimate tax planning. Nathan blurted, then froze as he realized his admission implicated both himself and his father. James moved toward the door. This meeting is over. We'll reconvene after consulting our attorneys. Sit down, James. My mother's voice cut through the room. The first words she'd spoken since our presentation began. You're not going anywhere until we get to the bottom of this. The authority in her tone stopped him cold. For perhaps the first time, Diana Carson was asserting control over her husband rather than the reverse. Diana, don't let them manipulate you, James said, his tone suddenly gentle. These are complex business matters they don't understand. Did you steal from my company? She demanded. Of course not. I've been protecting our interests. Did you take money from Carson Manufacturing through these shell companies? James hesitated, calculating. There were legitimate business arrangements. Yes or no, James? His expression hardened. Everything I did was to secure our future. Sometimes business requires creative solutions. Did you know the Barrett deal would close our factory and fire our people? Another hesitation. Restructuring was inevitable in today's market. My mother stood, her voice shaking with rage. You lied to me. You manipulated me against my own daughter. You've been stealing from my family's company. Our company, James corrected. And I've increased its value tenfold. By committing fraud, Marcus interjected, which the authorities will be very interested in. As if on cue, the boardroom door opened to reveal two people in suits displaying FBI badges. Perfect timing, Marcus said. Agent Roberts, Agent Diaz, thank you for joining us. James Whitfield. Agent Roberts asked. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding wire fraud, securities fraud, and embezzlement. James's composure finally shattered. This is a setup. Diana, don't let them do this. But my mother had turned away from him, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. In them, I saw grief, regret, and dawning comprehension of how thoroughly she had been deceived. As the FBI agents led James away for questioning, Nathan tried to slip out unnoticed. Mr. Whitfield, called Agent Diaz. We'll need to speak with you as well. The board meeting continued in stunned silence until Franklin Pierce cleared his throat. I believe we should take an immediate vote to suspend the Barrett Industries transaction pending full investigation of these allegations. The vote was unanimous. A second vote removed James and Nathan from all positions within the company, effective immediately. A third vote, proposed by Eleanor Wu, reinstated me as creative director with expanded authority over operations. As the meeting concluded, board members approached to offer shocked apologies. Employees who had gathered outside the boardroom broke into applause when Franklin announced the sale was canceled and I was returning. In the chaos, I found my mother sitting alone, staring at her wedding ring. "Mom," I said softly. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "I didn't know, Melanie. I swear I didn't know about any of this." "I believe you. I chose him over you." Her voice broke. "I let him push you out. How can you ever forgive me?" I took her hand. "We have a lot to talk about. But right now, we have a company to save." As we walked out of the boardroom together, I glimpsed my grandfather's portrait on the wall. For a moment, I could almost see him nodding in approval. The Carson family legacy would continue after all. The weeks following the dramatic board meeting were a whirlwind of activity as we worked to stabilize Carson manufacturing and address the damage James had caused. The company's revival became my singular focus, though the emotional aftermath of family betrayal lingered beneath the surface. My first priority was securing the company's financial foundation. With James and Nathan removed, we conducted a thorough audit, uncovering the full extent of the fraud. Approximately $4.7 million had been diverted through various schemes, even more than our initial estimate. Working with federal investigators, we traced most of the funds to offshore accounts controlled by James. "We've frozen the accounts we could identify," Agent Roberts informed me during a follow-up meeting. "Recovery efforts are underway, but these cases are complex. Some money may never be recovered." With William Foster temporarily coming out of retirement to help, we implemented new financial controls and transparency measures. The board appointed a special committee to oversee financial governance, with Franklin Pierce as chair. "Your grandfather believed a business should be run with transparency," William told me as we worked late restructuring the accounting department. "Thomas always said if you need to hide your actions, you're doing something wrong." Professionally, my reinstatement as creative director was formalized with an expanded role as chief operating officer. The board acknowledged that my leadership had been instrumental in the company's previous success and would be crucial to its recovery. Jessica returned as my executive assistant with a significant promotion and raise. "I never doubted you'd be back," she said on her first day, placing a small wooden carving on my desk, a miniature phoenix I had designed years earlier. Seemed appropriate. Gabrielle was promoted to chief financial officer, her integrity and courage during the crisis proving her leadership capabilities. Other loyal employees who had been demoted or marginalized under James's regime were restored to appropriate positions. My brother Ethan surprised everyone by accepting a role with the company, heading a new division focused on music-related furniture, high-end audio cabinets, instrument stands, and studio furniture. His connections in the music industry opened entirely new markets. "Dad would be proud," I told him as he set up his office down the hall from mine. "Of both of us," he replied. "We finished what he started." Perhaps the most emotional moment came when we established the Harold Carson Memorial Foundation, dedicated to supporting furniture design students with scholarships and mentorship programs. At the foundation launch, we also announced that local authorities had reopened the investigation into our father's death based on the evidence we had uncovered. While the investigation continued, the circumstances surrounding Dad's accident looked increasingly suspicious. The original police report noted abnormalities that had been dismissed at the time, but now appeared significant in light of James's history. "We may never have definitive proof," Agent Diaz told us candidly. "But we're building a strong circumstantial case." The legal consequences for James and Nathan unfolded gradually. James was indicted on multiple federal charges including wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Released on bail pending trial, he faced up to 30 years in prison, if convicted on all counts. Nathan faced lesser charges related to his role in the financial fraud. Always the weaker personality, he quickly agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for leniency, providing damaging testimony against his father. The most complex relationship to rebuild was with my mother. Diana Carson had been both victim and enabler of James's schemes, manipulated by his charm, yet willingly participating in my removal. Our first private conversation after the board meeting was tense and tearful. "I don't expect immediate forgiveness," she said as we sat in her office, surrounded by family photographs, including several with James that she hadn't yet removed. "What I did to you was unforgivable. You were manipulated," I offered, not entirely convinced myself. "Yes, but I was also jealous." Her admission surprised me. "Your father always said you were the future of Carson. The board respected you more than they ever respected me. When James came along and made me feel important, valued for my business judgment rather than just being Thomas Carson's daughter, I wanted to believe him. He targeted you specifically for access to the company," I said gently. "Just like he did with Rebecca's family. I know that now." She twisted her wedding ring, still on her finger despite everything. "But that doesn't excuse how I treated you. A mother should believe in her child, not push her aside for a man she barely knew." Our reconciliation was neither quick nor easy. We began with weekly dinners, awkward at first, gradually finding our way back to some version of mother and daughter. We started family therapy, bringing Ethan into the sessions as we worked through decades of complicated dynamics that had made our family vulnerable to someone like James. "Diana placed unrealistic expectations on you from childhood," our therapist observed during one session. "You were meant to fulfill her father's legacy, while she simultaneously resented you for being the chosen successor." My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to be the daughter my father needed. When I couldn't be, I expected Melanie to be perfect instead." These painful revelations helped us understand how James had exploited existing fractures in our family. He hadn't created the problems, he had merely widened the cracks that already existed. 3 months after the board meeting, we held a company-wide gathering to unveil our new direction. Employees filled the factory floor, standing among the machines and half-finished furniture pieces that represented their livelihoods, jobs that would have vanished if the Barrett sale had proceeded. "Carson Manufacturing has always been more than a company," I told them. "It's a family legacy built on craftsmanship, integrity, and community." Recent events tested those values, but they remain our foundation moving forward. I announced several new initiatives: profit sharing for all employees, expanded benefits, investment in sustainable manufacturing technologies, and a commitment to keeping production local. The response was overwhelming: applause, tears, and a standing ovation that echoed through the factory my grandfather had built. As Carson Manufacturing stabilized, industry recognition followed. My renewal collection, now properly attributed, won the prestigious Heirloom Award for Sustainable Design. Orders flooded in from retailers and direct consumers who appreciated both our quality craftsmanship and ethical business practices. 1 year after the fateful voicemail that had started it all, we gathered for the company's annual gala. The theme, Renewal and Legacy, reflected our journey. I stood at the podium, looking out at faces that had been part of my life since childhood. Employees, board members, craftspeople, designers, and family. My mother sat in the front row, finally beginning to look like herself again after a year of reckoning with James's betrayal. The criminal cases continued, but she had filed for divorce and removed his portraits from company walls. Beside her sat Ethan, whose music division had exceeded all expectations, bringing youthful energy to our traditional industry. A wise person once told me that furniture isn't just functional. It's where families gather, where memories are made, I said, echoing my grandfather's words. At Carson Manufacturing, we create more than tables and chairs. We create pieces that witness first steps, family dinners, graduation celebrations, and quiet moments of reflection. Our craftsmanship becomes part of your family story. I paused, looking at the framed photos displayed on stage. My grandfather Thomas in his first workshop, my father Harold teaching me woodworking, and a new addition. A photo of our current team standing proudly in front of the factory. This past year taught me that family, both the one we're born into and the one we create, can be our greatest strength or our greatest vulnerability. Carson Manufacturing survived because people who believed in its values stood together against those who would sacrifice integrity for profit. The gala concluded with the unveiling of our newest collection, featuring collaborative designs from our entire creative team. As guests mingled afterward, William Foster approached me with a glass of champagne. "Your grandfather would be bursting with pride," he said, "not just for saving the company, but for how you did it, with integrity and compassion. Even toward those who didn't deserve it?" I asked, thinking of my mother's tearful apologies and my own complicated path to forgiveness. "Especially then," William replied. "Thomas always said the true test of character isn't how you treat those who deserve kindness, but how you treat those who don't." Later that evening, I visited my grandfather's grave, placing a small wooden box I'd crafted beside his headstone. Inside was a letter detailing everything that had happened and how we'd preserved his legacy. I didn't know if he could read it, but writing it had helped me process the journey. As I stood to leave, I noticed my mother waiting quietly some distance away, respectful of my private moment. I motioned for her to join me. "I come here often," she admitted, trying to understand what he would have wanted, what he would have thought of how I handled things. "He would have wanted us to move forward," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Together." She took my hand, and we stood in silence before my grandfather's grave. 3 generations of Carsons connected by more than just a business. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. But as we walked back to our cars under a sky full of stars, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that devastating voicemail a year earlier. Hope. Carson Manufacturing would continue, stronger for having weathered the storm. Our family might never be the same, but perhaps we could build something new. A relationship based on truth rather than expectations, on authenticity rather than appearance. In furniture making, my grandfather always said the strongest pieces come from wood that has weathered storms. The grain shows the struggle, but that's what makes it beautiful. Perhaps the same was true for families. The story of betrayal and redemption at Carson Manufacturing taught me that family legacy isn't just what we inherit, it's what we choose to build. Has your family faced challenges that ultimately made you stronger? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of fighting for what's right despite overwhelming odds resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real stories of overcoming family betrayal. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself can lead to justice and healing. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Sometimes the family we find in unexpected places gives us the strength to rebuild what was broken. Until next time, remember that your legacy is yours to define.